Good morning. This is Professor Thomas Blackwood, and I'm going to read you an article that I wrote earlier this year. Within this past year. It was this most recent summer when we had smoke in the air from all the forest fires that were going on. The title of this article is "An Ounce of Prevention is Worth a Pound of Cure, or Maybe More." This is a vital briefing regarding the water cycle and forest fire policy. How to prevent forest fires? Water/irrigate the forests. Wet/green trees don't burn very well. Suggest it become policy with all replanting after clear cutting that automated solar-powered, well-fed irrigation be installed to nurture the young trees into the future. The design looks like a well with a 4-post tower above it. The base is square around the well and the posts come to a point at the top. Solar panels are mounted at the top and water jets off the side of the tower. Water tanks mounted in the center of the tower, and probably an auxiliary vertical axis wind turbine sticking off the top of the tower. Whenever the sun is out or the wind is blowing, water will be pumped out of the well. First fill the reservoir tanks and then proceed to mist the surrounding area from the jets off the side of the tower. Imagine, so the tower gets sun, it's going to have to be tall enough to be above the average tree height. So it's going to be 150 to 200 feet tall. Water/sprinkler towers in the forest. And they can have Wi-Fi, connect them, so you have a series of these all on automatic to protect the forest. Ground irrigation strips could be installed as well, but likely aren't necessary. There's a fire in the forest? Turn on the sprinklers. That was easy. Tell residents and the government and park services to water their yards and gardens and trees during the heat of the day when we are not supposed to, quote unquote. The idea of not watering during the day because it is, quote, wasteful of water, unquote, wasteful because so much of it evaporates, is not true. It's not at all a waste of the water for it to evaporate. Evaporation is a cooling process, so daytime watering helps to cool down your local area. 90% of what falls as rain starts off as evaporation from the landscape. Only about 10% of what evaporates off the ocean actually makes it back to land, and most of that hits the coastal region before it crosses the nearest mountain range. So if you are concerned about the drought, or lack of rain, please water during the day. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors it is okay to water in the day. We want a lot of rain in southern Oregon to help put out the fires. Now, this is as of August 2018. But there's fires. Just imagine that there's a fire going on right now. I'm sure there's a fire somewhere. If there's not, there probably will be soon. We want a lot of rain in southern Oregon or wherever the fire is to help put out the fires. A lot of water needs to evaporate so it can recondense and fall as rain. If you don't use it, you lose it. The water in the ground is not stationary. It is slowly percolating by gravity downhill towards the nearest stream, river, or ocean. We as a community need to get busy pumping that water out of the ground and getting it back into the atmospheric water cycle by implementing daytime watering en masse. When it rains, that replenishes the aquifers. The other extreme on the other side of the rain scale from drought to little rain is flooding, too much rain. More rain than that area is prepared to handle. What can we do on an individual level to help prepare our land to tolerate large-scale rain events? Establish rainwater catch systems on a large scale. Whatever scale you are able to do, some is better than none. On all new construction, install a 10,000 plus gallon tank under the structure and a smaller rooftop tank for pressure on your local water lines. Suggest to government entities that we establish a much larger system of man-made deep lakes and water reservoirs. This gives the rain a place to go if the landscape isn't able to absorb it as fast as it falls. Watering your terrain regularly will help train it to absorb more water. The more greenery and foliage your plants on your property have, the more water they will be able to absorb. The more you water your garden, the more it will grow and produce more water-absorbing plant matter. It is a positive upward spiral of life. The plants breathe the pollution out of the air, giving us clean, fresh, lovely-smelling oxygen to inhale. They also give shade to help cool off the hot days and transpire, evaporate water off their leaves, which has a cooling effect too. Evaporation is a cooling process. Aside from helping to prevent forest fires, cleaning the air, and reversing global warming, is there any other cool reason why we should implement these ideas? Yes, there is. Archaeologists have found evidence of lost cities about 20 feet or more below sea level at various locations around the oceans of the world. If, as a global community, we can work as a team and sequester sufficient rain in land storage systems, it is possible that we can effect a lowering of the ocean levels by reducing the flow of water back to the oceans, by reducing the flow of water back to the rivers, streams, and street water sewer drain systems. Imagine all the new beachfront real estate in Hawaii and all the other Pacific islands or other islands around the world if the sea level reduced by 25 feet. If you own beachfront property or have access to ocean liners, consider installing a solar desalination operation. Imagine a big black kettle with mirrors and/or large magnifying glasses reflecting and directing sunlight to the bottom and sides of the kettle. With salt water direct from the ocean pumped into the kettle, the fresh water that evaporates can be bottled and saved or sold, and same for the sea salt, the stuff left over in the bottom of the kettle. Fresh water and sea salt are both valuable commodities. Why has this become a problem? What are the causes of the global/local warming and climate change effect? How did we get to this point where we have to correct the water cycle with auxiliary irrigation of our forests and urban landscapes? The popular theory that usually gets promoted is that CO2 emissions and other related greenhouse gases are to blame. This may have something to do with it. I'm sure it's a part of the problem. But it's not the only factor. Planting more trees, vertical gardens as a facade for your building, and rooftop gardens will help absorb excess CO2. What is not generally brought up is the fact that much of our human infrastructure, such as buildings and roads, or rooftops and roadways, do nothing for the water cycle and environment. Most rooftops and roadways simply create water runoff when it rains. Very little of that water stays on the surface of these impervious surfaces. Since no water is soaking in, there is very little evaporation, cooling, that happens off of all that area of land covered by such structures. To compound the lack of cooling properties these have, most rooftops and roadways are dark in color, which means they absorb a lot of solar energy and get hot during the heat of the day, and radiate that heat back into the local environment, heating up the local area. Even if they are light in color, they are still reflecting energy back into the atmosphere, which still adds to the local/global heating effect. Urban concrete jungles are thus heat sinks, getting hotter and hotter as the stone and metal components sit in the sun. Before there were any roads in urban modern cities, there was a much vaster temperate rainforest that existed. The perpetual cycle of rain and evaporation kept things growing and green, allowed the planet to cool off, polar ice caps developed, and the sea level was lower. Now the buildings and roads that exist where forest once was are bypassing the water out of the evaporation cycle. Once the rain hits the drain, it is a pretty fast route to the nearest stream, river, or ocean. So there is thus much, much less evaporation or cooling than would have occurred in times past, and thus the natural cooling process has been cut down to not a lot. And with the less evaporation, there is less that can recondense as rain on the mountains to make snow and to travel to the interior of the country. And thus we have problems with droughts. Then the oceans are getting warmer because the atmosphere is warmer, and so more water evaporates off of the ocean and occasionally hits hard inland a bit. And they aren't prepared to catch the rain, so they get flooded out, and the water is wasted instead of saved for the next dry period. You now have knowledge that many don't. Share this info and put it to use. Our home, planet, is in our hands. We can continue cutting down trees to build more roads and buildings if the right people in charge of such are not made aware of these facts. Or we may develop more holistic construction concepts that incorporate elements of a healthy water cycle. The power and choice are yours. Thank you for listening to me read this post. Please take action. Professor Thomas Blackwood.